Hello everyone, this is Andrew Martin and welcome to the BCM Games of the Month for August 2016. I say games because this month we're going to focus on two prominent figures in the chess world who have unfortunately passed away recently. And the first of these is the legendary Viktor Korchnoi. Now doubtless there will be many detailed obituaries of Korchnoi's life, so I will limit myself to a few words about him here, due to the confines of video recordings. Chess Grandmaster Viktor Korchnoi, who defected from Russia to the West in 1976, died in Switzerland, aged 85, in June 2016. He was born in 1931 in St. Petersburg, and as a young person he survived the siege of Leningrad during World War II. Perhaps this experience formed him into the great chess fighter that he became. Korchnoi will undoubtedly be seen as one of the best players never to have been world champion, perhaps in the same rank as Paul Keres. Korchnoi was a four-time USSR champion when the USSR Championship was more or less the unofficial world championship tournament for decades, and he was ranked number one in the world in 1965. He played 3 matches, perhaps this is what he's most famous for, against his rival Anatoly Karpov, losing the 1974 final of the candidates matches and subsequently 2 world championship matches in 1978 and 1981. Korchnoi is renowned for his longevity, and he continued playing chess well into old age. He was the oldest active chess grandmaster on the international tournament circuit for many years, and he won the World Senior Chess Championship in 2006. It's hard to do justice to a figure so great as Korchnoi in one game, but I've chosen a game which perhaps typifies his fascinating, sharp style, and it comes from a tournament played in New York in 1996, where he's pitted against Grandmaster Maurice Ashley, himself of course a prominent figure in the chess world today, where he's made his name as a fantastic commentator. Well, of course, Ashley was also a formidable player, and so Korchnoi White kicked off with one of his favourite opening moves, c4. Playing black against Korchnoi was a very hard task during the 1970s and 1980s because Korchnoi worked tremendously hard at the game, and he had a number of very original ideas. In fact, I think this whole game is played in an original and dynamic manner with White. Well, Ashley played e6, and now Korchnoi comes with e4, which changes this game from some sort of Queen's Gambit or Nimzo Indian coming up to a uniquely English formation. Now, White is probably threatening e5 here. So black's got 2 ways he can deal with that. He can either play c5 and let e5 happen, or he can challenge in the centre with d5. Both c5 and d5 are thought to be absolutely okay for black, but both of them reach very difficult positions, which I guess is exactly what Korchnoi wanted. So White pushes forward, and black takes up the challenge with d4, a typical counter in positions of this type. White takes on f6, black takes on c3, and now White contents himself with the recapture on c3, accepting double pawns. His reasoning is that when black recaptures with the queen, he's going to gain time on that queen a little later on with the help of the move bishop g5. So Korchnoi starts to tee that idea up by playing knight f3 and d4. And black, for his part, is happy to challenge in the centre with e5. Now already this is a rather sharp situation, and Korchnoi mentions the interesting move knight takes e5 here, with the point that when black takes, White's going to go queen e2. Now this seems as though it might win a pawn, because bishop d6 is rather unfavourable for black after the move f4. But here, I think going back, black can sacrifice a pawn quite cheerfully by playing bishop e6, and let White win the pawn on e5, because after bishop c5 the white pawn structure is so ragged that black has pretty good compensation for the pawn. This is the type of activity that black is looking forward to when he plays in this manner. And, of course, the type of activity which white's got to stop. So white presses on in his search for the initiative, and he plays bishop g5, the queen moves, and then he hits the knight with d5, sending black's knight back to base. And then comes bishop d3. So you can see white is creating the type of situation where if black hadn't analysed this position before, he'll find it actually quite difficult to play the right move. And I'm not sure Ashley's reaction is correct here. He tries to play it safe with bishop f5. Now, just going back, there are two much sharper alternatives. The first of these is f5. I can't immediately see anything wrong with that move because, of course, black's threatening e4, and knight takes e5 can't be played at the moment because the bishop on g5 is hanging. So that clearly is a possibility. Possibly actually was a bit afraid to play that. It's such a sharp move, and he might have thought, well, Korchnoi's prepared that in advance. I want to avoid that line. Similarly, black can try e4. And then white's got a very interesting idea here. Bishop takes e4, sacrificing the bishop, and after that, king to d2. And here we feel the original flavour of this line. Well, white's point is that black's king is stuck in the middle. His queen's on the same file as the king. White's threatening rook e1. And if black plays queen takes c4, we're going to go rook e1 anyway. After which black's obliged to give back the piece. It's got to go bishop e6. We take it. And now what's going on after f6? Well, again, this is the type of line where a few moves back down the line, you know, if you're looking at this position in your mind's eye, you can't quite decide who this position's good for. I mean, looking at it now, it seems okay for black. But you have to be pretty courageous to enter into this line against Korchnoi, because there's always the nagging feeling in the back of your mind that he's analysed it beforehand. So Ashley follows the formula of when confronted with something new or unusual or very sharp in the opening, he plays it rather safe with a healthy developing move. Hence, bishop f5. And white now continues to sharpen the play with queen a4 check. And then after knight d7, another one of these normal developing moves, another shocker from white, he castles. So even though black's been playing these developing moves, Ashley probably felt in the back of his mind that he was being caught in some sort of Korchnoi pre-game preparation. And the first point of white's idea is that if black takes on d3, we take on e5 with a very powerful fork. Queen f5 protects, but only for an instant, as after rook fe1, the black king is going to perish in the centre in very short order indeed. So once again, going back to the game itself, Ashley continues with just normal development, or so he thinks, bishop d6, and Korchnoi chops off that bishop on f5. It's worth mentioning here that if white tries to play it really sharply with knight h4, knight takes f5, black can play the slightly surprising move here, king to d8. And it's rather surprising that black is actually better in this position, but the more you look at it, the more you favour black's chances. White's got no real way of taking advantage of the black king stuck in the middle, and black has this really annoying move knight c5 that white is going to have to deal with, whether he chops on d6 or not. So white has also got to be careful in this situation, and Korchnoi continues very sharply. He takes on f5, black recaptures, and now c5. Again, a very original move, decoying the bishop away from e5, whereupon white's intention is to chop that pawn. So all very sharp and very interesting play in the opening. Now black, what can he do? Well, he can take two of white's pieces, but neither of these captures is favourable in any way. Clearly queen takes e5, fails to rook e1, very simple. And queen takes g5, is pulverised immediately after queen takes d7 check. So that leaves bishop takes f2, as mentioned by Korchnoi in his notes. And after that, white apparently gets good compensation after rook takes f2, queen takes e5, bishop f4. Although it's not totally clear cut. White wins the pawn on c7, but at least in this line black gets to castle. Korchnoi evaluates this position as slightly better for white. I would say it is rather unclear. Nothing completely clear as yet. But of course, white's got the bishop and he's got a passed pawn, so these factors have to be reckoned with. Ashley played f6. Korchnoi continued to play incredibly sharply with g4. And Ashley, perhaps feeling he had no choice, captured on e5. Well, there are some interesting lines, again mentioned by Korchnoi in his informator notes. After bishop takes f2 check, rook takes f2, the theme remains the same. Black's going to take on e5, and once again white plays bishop f4. Can white trap the black king in the middle? Well, if black plays moves like queen takes d5, which I don't trust for an instant, it's not completely surprising to me that white is going to get some sort of tremendous initiative by playing rook d1. Black retreats, tries to get the queens off the board. White's happy to oblige. Rook e1, knight e5, probably the best. But then the best that black can do is to go into this horrible rook endgame, where he's a pawn down, but the white rook's going to hit the 7th very quickly. So I imagine that's clearly better for white. Running this one more time, the capture on f2, the capture on e5, bishop f4. There's another morsel on c3 to gobble, but unfortunately after rook e2 check, once again the black king finds itself in the middle of the board, which I don't trust at all. I think white must be clearly better here, although of course the white king is rather open. But after bishop f2, rook f2, queen e5, I think bishop f4, the best move is queen e7. And when you see that move, you think, well, maybe black could have done this. And if queen f4, rook fe8, black is certainly on the board here. Although white still got those advantages of the bishop and the passed pawn, there are plenty of holes in white's position for black to exploit. So maybe this was why Korchnoi evaluated this as equal in his notes. I think it's just very unclear. I think certainly Ashley should have done this. Going back to the game, he plays queen takes e5, allowing Korchnoi to win the queen, but he's hoping to get some sort of blockade position after rook takes e5, knight takes e5. For the queen, black's only got a rook and a knight, but white's king position is loose. There are a few holes around the king, and black's bishop is pretty secure, defending the black queen side, which is why Korchnoi tries to get it off the board, and I think correctly, with bishop e3. Ashley takes and plays king to b8, maintaining this solid position. And now he's saying to Korchnoi, well, can you break through? I've got an unchallengeable knight on e5. Your pawn structure is now quite ragged. But of course, as Korchnoi would say, the queen is the queen. And so what we're treated to over the next 15 moves or so is a display of technique by Korchnoi, which I thought was very impressive when I played through this game. How does white make something of this position? Well, first of all, he centralises his queen. And Ashley stands pat with h6. Perhaps this was the right moment to challenge the centre. And again, Korchnoi mentions this move c6. I guess black didn't do that. He didn't want to open up his king. But perhaps that's the correct move. If white plays c4, we're going to take this pawn off and find activity for the rooks after rook c8. And with rook c4 coming in, this position is not at all clear. I'm pretty sure this is what black should have done. Although, once again, the passed pawn has to be respected. Instead, by standing pat, Ashley allows white to build up unhindered with c4 and then c5. And after c6, now mistimed, white comes forward with d6. Now I think the position's clarifying in white's favour, because the black rooks can't get active. And when they can't get active, the queen is boss, controlling the position. And after white's next excellent move, which is queen to e4, white's initiative is starting to pick up pace. This is a very good move, and certainly not a move which average players would play. they'd be afraid of the fact that the queen is on the same file as the rook. But the knight's pinned. There are no discoveries worth mentioning. And Korchnoi is going to further activate his pieces, even though the rook's protected, with rook to b1. Again tying down the knight. If the knight moves, queen comes chomping in on c6. So Ashley moves away from the file, and Korchnoi tries to tie black down even further by activating his queen and then activating his rook to the maximum. And this is very handy, the rook on b4, as it protects the pawn. Well, black's problem now, he's got an impressive knight, but he's very passive. And this allows another good technical move, king to g2, taking away any tactics. The knight is now looking less than impressive on e5. It looks pretty, but it's not doing anything. And I think left to his own devices, Korchnoi is just going to build up some sort of an attack with the a-pawn, just marching the a-pawn down the board and saying to black, well, what can you do? Hence, the next move, b5, which I think is quite ugly. But actually is getting rather afraid about white's attacking chances. I mean, if white doesn't want to push that a-pawn, he can also consider a move like rook a4, trying to put the boot in on the black king on a7. So Ashley makes a bid for freedom, but now perhaps Korchnoi surprised him slightly by moving the rook back to e4. Now, if this is good for white, then going back one more move, maybe b6 was the way, if black wanted to get his rooks into the game. So with b5, rook e4, a5, is that the black rooks are still almost paralysed, and white exploits this with queen to f5, threatening rook takes e5. And the problem for black is white's going to take on e5 anyway, which we see after rook db7. We're going to chop that knight, and then we're going to play the key move, queen to e4, which again ties black up even more. But this would maybe have been better than the game continuation, rook bb7, as this way round the sacrifice on e5 and queen e4 is much stronger, because black can't defend c6. And once c6 drops, black's whole game falls apart. The white queen is rampant, and now black has two passed pawns to deal with. So, feeling that he is unable to deal with all the threats, Ashley decides to resign. Now, perhaps that won't go down as Korchnoi's greatest game, or one of his victories against an absolute world-class opponent. But Ashley is a strong Grandmaster, and this game was very original, so I do hope you enjoyed it, and let it serve as a small tribute to the great Viktor Korchnoi. Well, now I'd like to pass on to my next game, and this will feature obviously a less prominent chess player, but a chess thinker in his own right, Dr. Danny Kopek. A few words about Kopek, who also died in June 2016. Kopek was an academic. He graduated from Dartmouth College in 1975, and he later received a PhD in machine intelligence from the University of Edinburgh in 1982. And this was where I got to know him, because of course he was playing a lot of tournaments in the UK at that time. I believe he came to play in London. He didn't only confine himself to Scotland. And Kopek was, of course, a strong international master, having several top three finishes in the US Open, which of course was a very prominent tournament at that time. Korchnoi wrote numerous books on the subject of chess. It's fair to say he was a chess lover. He produced 8 chess instructional DVDs. He was a splendid speaker on the game, and he ran many chess training camps. And he also worked to promote his chess opening, the so-called Kopek system, which we're going to feature in this game. Now, I remember his Foxy Openings video on this subject, the Kopek system, which he said, I recall the words, it was an opening system which actually started out as a joke. And the Kopek system is characterised by the move bishop d3, which actually looks like a beginner's mistake. But as Kopek remarked, it had the effect of throwing Sicilian players completely off balance. course, back in the 1980s, no databases, nothing. You know, if you're getting ready to play your favourite Pelican or Najdorf or Dragon variations, you're booked up to the eyeballs in these systems. How are you going to feel when you have to face something completely new? So, despite the fact that this looks silly, it's not half as silly as it looks. And the first point is to play the move c3. That bishop's not going to stay on d3 for any length of time. It's going to retreat, rather in the style of the Ruy Lopez, and white is getting ready for moves like d3 or d4, according to what black plays. So we're going to look at a game that Danny played in 1982 against the then international master, I believe, Danny King. Danny King, of course, has... he's also a very prominent figure in the chess world today. Grandmaster, commentator, producer of many tremendous DVDs. And I think at the time, King was probably slightly confused with what Kopek has done. So, on his own devices, he's got to find some sort of retort. He plays e5, castles, and now knight ge7. So, black has chosen a kind of Botvinnik formation against Kopek's system. Now, the thing about white's idea is that it is rather slow. Black has got plenty of time to set up his own favourite formation. He's also got plenty of time to make a mistake. And this is what Kopek found when he played his system against weaker players. Left to their own devices, they simply didn't know what to do against white's methodical build-up. Because white's idea, in the style of the Ruy Lopez, is just to treat the opening very, very slowly, get the pieces out, have a look around, and then try and find the right moment to play either d4 or, who knows, even f4, given due preparation. But that's all a long way off, and both players are jockeying for position here, just getting their pieces out. So h3 was answered by h6, and seeing the slight weakness on h6, Kopek plays queen to d2. I'm not sure that that is the best move here. White can obviously consider moves like knight bd2 or knight a3. Both these ideas are in the slow style of this system. We can't fault queen d2 really, but when you play that, all you have to answer is the question, well, where are you going to put this knight? d4. Well, this move shows that Kopek was also playing originally at this point, because I think that's slightly too early. It might even be classified as a mistake. And King actually moves to exploit this mistake in the game. I think better here is a4, and just to continue the slow ideas with knight to a3. Although it has to be said that after f5, black is in good shape. I suppose that's the drawback with the Kopek system, that with all these slow ideas taking place, you know, black's also got plenty of time to build up. And whereas a weak player might make blunders in their build-up, strong players are far more alert to positional nuances. And here, in this precise position, white's got to deal with the idea of f4. So, although white could have done this, that would have also been satisfactory for black. d4, well, why is that a mistake? It looks very logical. Okay, let's see. King moves in with e takes d4, lengthening the diagonal of the bishop. And now comes queen to b6. And this is the drawback with white's plan to date, as black is putting pressure not only on d4, he's hitting b2 as well. So Kopek launches into tactical operations with d takes c5. Was that best? Well, white could have covered b2 with bishop b3, allowing black to take on d4, and then bishop f4. Well, this looks okay, but I think f5 would give black a pretty good position. And when white takes the pawn on d6, black can take on h3. This looks pretty good for black. So white goes into these complications. He allows Danny to take on b2. He's going to take on d6. Black takes on a1. White takes on e7. And after rook e8, e5, we now reach a rather random position. very sharp indeed. Difficult to say what's going on. Black has won material, but first of all he's got to round up that pawn on e7, and secondly his king might be slightly weak. And we also note that a move like queen takes a2 is impossible here due to the discovered attack bishop takes g6 when black loses his queen. So black's also got to be slightly concerned about his queen on a1, and that of course is the point of e5, trying to shut the queen out of the game. So black takes on e5 with the knight, and white goes knight d4. Again, thinking about trapping that queen. So black must continue with knight c4. White went queen to b4. I guess as long as the pawn on e7 lives, then black can't consider himself out of the woods tactically, and he can't really realise his material advantage until that pawn on e7 is off the board. So now comes b5, and possibly that is also a mistake. I think black should probably content himself with the capture on e3. I know as black, if I could get rid of the dark square bishop in a position like this, I'd feel much happier. And then go queen takes a2. The point is that after bishop a4, we're just going to give back the exchange with bishop e6. Takes, and well, black is okay here. He hasn't yet demolished the pawn on e7, but he's got pretty strong minor pieces. The bishops are quite good, and black's queen is back in the game. So this might have been the way to handle the position. Instead, b5 takes, knight to d6 is Danny's point, but then came queen to c6. And again, I'm not at all sure that is the best move. Queen to d5 looks best to me, and now suddenly the queen is forking two black pieces. Possibly, and I say possibly because it's hard to say what's going through the players' minds at a distance of, 34 years. But queen c6, of course, forks the pieces as well. But we see the difference after queen d5. Black's probably got to play knight to f5. And then we get a sharp variation after queen takes a8. Knight takes d4. Bishop d3. Queen to b2. And now rook to c1. And I would say that Kopek didn't go in for this because he simply found it hard to see moves like bishop d3 and then rook to c1. They're difficult moves to find. Somehow the bishop's hanging on d3. The rook on c1 looks slightly unstable. But black's position is not that great either. And so I think that would have been better than queen to c6, because the difference now is that black can take on d4. Kopek took on d6, maintaining his pawn. The bishop came to e5, queen to c5, and now black played bishop a6. Suddenly, black is getting his pieces into the game. Queen d5 hitting f7 was answered by king g7, and rook a1 by rook a c8. Bishop c5, and now black's about to make his fatal mistake. All these complications earlier probably meant that black was getting into some sort of time trouble. At least that's how the subsequent course of this game looks to me. Danny played bishop f6. Checking this on the machine, what he should do is play bishop b7, leaving both bishops en prise. If white takes on b7, the idea is to take on c5. And if bishop a4, rook c7. We then get another very sharp position arising where white sacrifices the queen and black must play bishop d6 in order to get the pawn off the board on e7. And we just reach an interesting position here where the real question is whether black can actually win in this situation of this type. It's only rook and knight versus queen, but opposite colour bishops are on the board. And it's a question of how black is going to break through. Well, that would have only given black winning chances. As played in the game, bishop f6 allows bishop b3. And suddenly, Kopek is in to black's position, as it's impossible to defend f7. As I say, it's probably time trouble. Danny plays bishop d3, but now, of course, this gives Kopek the chance to finish black off, which he does in style with bishop a4. Black takes on e7, rook takes e7, and of course the game's over, whether black takes on b1 or not. It finished g5, bishop takes e8, queen takes b1, check, king to h2, and Danny King resigned. And in fact, although we might laugh at moves like bishop d3, if we actually check out Danny King Kopek's stats with his own system, we'll see that he's scoring very, very heavily with it against players of all standards up to Grandmaster level. So the Kopek system, even today, cannot be written off. It's a significant contribution to opening theory. Well, I hope you enjoyed that small tribute to two chess greats. And I thank you for viewing this video and look forward to the pleasure of your company next month.